Welcome to today's episode of The Recovery Scene. I am your host, Leslie. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Tonight we have Alex Sessoms. Did I say it right?
Yep.
Sessoms.
Yep, you got it.
All right, the new married name, Alex Sessoms. Alex is here tonight to tell us her addiction to recovery story. Her messing around with drugs started around 13, 14 years old, and then, doing crystal meth in high school and everything. It got really bad when she hit about 18. But like I keep telling you guys, you don't want to hear me talk. You want to hear Alex. So I'm going to let her take it away. And I'm just so happy that you're here. Thank you so much for willing to be here and be vulnerable and, tell us your story.
Thank you for having me. All right. So I guess where it really started, my dad died when I was 10. I had like the perfect childhood, like white picket fence, mommy, daddy, brother, daughter, like the American dream type situation. And then my dad died unexpectedly at 10. He actually it was an accident. He fell and hit his head. And that was just like the whole rug got flipped out from under me. My mom, I feel like I lost both my parents in the same couple of weeks because she kind of just checked out. And it's crazy to think about because my dad was 35 when he died, which is 2 years younger than I am now. So it took me a while to like kind of put in perspective what my mom was going through and the age that she was and where I was versus where she was. And, it doesn't change that it affected me, but it does change the way that I look at it and how like it's weird when you get older and your parents become people. Right. They're not just superheroes,
Right, like you marry somebody thinking, making all these future plans and thinking you're going to grow old with them and everything, and then the rug's just going to pull out from under you.
Yeah, and she had 2 little kids, just a whole life change. And I was, like I said, I was 10, and I think that I felt like I had to take on the role of like taking care of my brother. And I think that's how I dealt with the grief, was like not grieving at all, just kind of like being like, well, I got to be the big kid. I got to step in the shoes and take care of stuff because my little brother was 8. And like I said, my mom was a basket case. But I think that's kind of where it started. My mom, when I started partying at that time, she like got her youth back. Her and my dad had been together since they were 13. So I was kind of like just left twisting in the wind. And I could do, no curfew. I could do, all the kids came to my house. My house was just like a big party house. And my mom would just go to bed and my room was on the other side of the house. And we just did whatever we wanted in there. So people, all the kids that had the stuff would come over to my house, and whatever they had, I would try. I was one of those, I'll try anything once. You're going to live your life, just.
Right. I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time.
Right.
Oh, God.
Right. No concept of finality of things or that, the actual consequences and how far that stuff is going to follow you. So I got into pretty heavy drugs at 14, like crystal meth, and I managed to graduate high school and graduate early and graduate with a 3.8 GPA. So,
wow, that's really impressive, especially everything that you were dealing with.
Yeah, it was kind of like my way of saying F you to pretty much my mom, because nobody gave a shit whether I got up and went to school. My brother dropped out in 8th grade. It was kind of like I had to self-motivate, and it made it feel that much better when I accomplished it. Mm-hmm. And cue the end of my accomplishments.
And that's a wrap.
Last point of pride before I went into the spiral. So like I said, I graduated early. So I lived really close to New Orleans. I grew up I was born in Wyoming, but I went to high school in Mississippi. So I was like an hour away from New Orleans. So I just packed up and went and moved to New Orleans and left my whole family in Mississippi and just kind of like went out on my own. And like I said, I was 18 years old and, I had to pay the bills. So I started stripping, and man, drugs are rampant in the strip clubs. They are everywhere. You're hard pressed to find a girl in one of those clubs that is about her money and not in there for, to support her habit, especially in New Orleans. So I met a girl in there, And she was like, hey, you want to do some dope? And I was like, yeah. At this point, I had only really messed with crystal meth. And I didn't realize that dope was a regional term, that dope in Mississippi meant crystal meth and dope in New Orleans meant heroin.
Ah.
So I was like, sure, yeah, let's do it. We'll stay up all night, make a lot of money. So she put me out a little line like this big. And I was like, that's not enough. And she was like, it's really good stuff. Just if you need more, I'll give you more, but I don't want to overdo it. So I did it. And then I realized, like, okay, this isn't the dope I thought it was.
Right.
I loved it. It shut off the scream in my head. It was just like everything, all the emotions that I hadn't, that were really just like, just kind of went, shh. I didn't care anymore. I'd spent so much time like at everything. And then all of a sudden it was like an injection of sociopathy. It was just like, I didn't care anymore. So I would do it just when I would go to work on the weekends. And then before I knew it was on the weekends, then on Wednesday. And then it was on the weekends, Wednesday. And then we'll start on Thursday so we can get an early start. And before I knew it, I'm 3 months in and have an actual like physical addiction to stuff. So really snuck up on me but it scratched an itch. It shut off feelings that I didn't want to feel. It was so nice to just be numb. And I didn't like it. It became an instant love affair with me. It took me a little while to kind of spiral, but I did. My fiance left me. I ended up detoxing. Thank God I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I started the detox. And then on the 4th day, I finally had the like strength to pick up the phone and call my mom. And I was like, I want to come home. So I went home. I got
for horrible.
Here. Oh, I was just like, tuck my tail and run back to mom and that's what I did. And she was like, come on home. So I went home. I stayed clean for like a year. I had a job. Things were good. And then I moved back to New Orleans, met a guy that I had known back in the day, and we started a love affair. And it turns out he was a heroin addict. So before I knew it, I was, doing it at work, then doing it on the weekends and on Wednesday. And then like, here we go again. And that lasted for really until now. We were together for 6 years. It was a really toxic relationship. He was very verbally abusive. He was never actually like physically abusive, but he would hold me by my neck, do like really intimidating shit to me, but it was never actually physically violent. And then I ended up having my parents and my family flew into Mississippi, New Orleans, had this whole intervention for me, and basically brought up all this shit that I had stolen to support my habit. The fact that I was with this guy who was horrible, like played surveillance videos at the house of him, like pushing me up against the wall. And like, so they were like, you can either go to rehab or, I'm going to charge you with these things. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to Florida. So I went to rehab. I got clean, and then it was just like, that's the cycle. I would get clean for a couple months and then go right back into it. I think I stayed clean maybe 3 months. And not to mention, after I got out of rehab, I went and hung out in Miami and got high then, and then went home and stayed for 4 months. And then let's see what happened after that. So then after that, I ended up fucking up again. And my mom was like, that's it, I'm done, we're cutting you off. And my Aunt Krista said, okay, no, I'm taking her to Texas where my grandpa lives. He had a farm. He was really isolated. So I went and got clean there. And I actually ended up staying clean for about 8 months. Then I moved to Austin, got an apartment there, got a job, and ended up being short on rent and having to go strip for the night. And I was back in it again, just like that. And every time I would get really confident and say, oh, it's in the past. And then every time it would just be so fast back into like full blown addiction where I'm struggling to pay my bills. My priority is the next high. I'm doing horribly shady shit, like ripping off Home Depot and doing just awful, awful things. And that's where I met my fiance. And I ended up, he wasn't even doing drugs at the time. And I was like, look, at this point, I was just like, had accepted that I was going to die an addict. And I was like, I'm a heroin addict. You will always come second to my drug. That's just the way that it is. I don't want to lie to you. I don't want to be a junkie and a liar down the road. So here it is. Here's all this on the table.
Heaven forbid you're a liar.
Yeah. Yeah. Not a junkie and a liar. Let's
sake.
Hold on. Hold on now.
Boundaries, Alex. Boundaries. You got to have limits.
Right. Right. Like that's the logic in that type of shit, you know, like whatever. But anyway, he ended up knowing that he was like, yeah, I already know, you know, my brother had an addiction. So he was doing cocaine at the time. And one night he was like calling me right now from the facility he's in. Anyway,
so he was listening a little bit.
I ended up bucking him for a while, and eventually I gave in and shot him up. You know, by this time I had been using needles since basically the whole time I was in Texas. Somebody had to do it for me first, and then I got tired of sharing and learned how to do it myself. Because, you know, you got to pay the person that hits you. If you want them to hit you, you got to pay them for their services. So I got sick of that. And basically it was just like a save money thing to learn on my own. But I didn't know anything about harm reduction. I destroyed my veins. All the veins in my arms are collapsed. My legs are messed up. I even had to start going to my neck because I had no other option, you know? But he ended up becoming a full-blown. So now we're in this codependent, heroin-focused relationship. And we ended up getting pulled over with a bunch of shit on us and both getting charged. So now I'm a felon on top of it. I tried to fight the charges. They didn't stick. Oh, and not to mention he had been in prison before that. He had done 5 years for a fist fight when he was 17. So now he's a 2-time felon and I'm a first-time felon at 30. And that it just kind of like my family at this point had cut me off. I was out on the streets. We were homeless for a while. We got into a horrible car wreck where he broke his back, just all this horrible stuff.
Oh my God.
One the other after the other, after the other, after the other. And it wasn't, you know, I've always heard that rock bottom is kind of like the thing that will jolt you into sobriety, but that was not the case for me. Like I just kept going and going, and the more pain I caused myself and the more like consequences I had, the harder it was for me to break away from the only thing that kind of stopped the feeling or the guilt and all. It was too much. So I always ended up back in that cycle, you know. I ended up on a PR. Say what?
Yeah, it's a cycle. It's a cycle.
Yeah, it is. It is a vicious, horrible cycle. And at that point, your brain, it stops being like a fun thing and you kick into kind of like fight or flight. And your brain really looks at it like it's survival mode. You know, you can do the drug and live or not do the drug and die. It's really how simple it is in your brain. And I would do anything for that next high. Not to mention, I felt like I had a responsibility to take care of him because it was my fault. You know, in my head, it was my fault that he was even in that position. So that was hard. I got out on a PR bond and we were homeless, like literally homeless, living under bridges, staying behind dollar stores until they'd run us off. I was flying a sign for money. And now I'm on the run from the police because I didn't check in to my bar. I got a PR bond. It was like a probationary bond. I just kind of said, catch me if you can. So I couldn't actually, I was too scared to go get a job. So I would just fly a sign, beg for money, do anything that I steal, again, back to stealing from, you know, Home Depot and place, and just anything to get a little bit of money to get through the next day, to wake up and do it all over again. And I think it was probably about 6 months. I didn't wake up not sick one time. Right. And finally we were on a motorcycle. My husband got a motorcycle and we were on it driving. I had shit in my backpack and the cops lit us up from behind. And my husband said, "What do you want to do, babe?" And I said, "Run." So he ran and they chased, and it ended up in a really horrible accident where me and him ended up in the hospital. I don't know how I survived that. I was a walking scab. I had all kinds of metacarpal contusions in my foot. My wrists were jacked up. It looked like somebody had rolled the skin up on my hand like a sardine can. It was horrible. And because it was so bad, they didn't arrest us that night. They let us go to the hospital and then go home. And then 9 days later, boop, boop, they lit us up again, and I was wanted, and they took me in, and I ended up staying in jail until they transferred me to prison, where I ended up doing about 13 months straight. And then I got out on parole and stayed clean for about 4 months and went right back into using, ran from parole, just kind of like went off on the run, got picked up again, got thrown back in jail, ended up doing I ended up doing like 2 months and 2 years and 2 months total, which is 2 months longer than my initial sentence. But
right. And you're withdrawing in jail, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Every time in jail, I would withdraw in jail, and they don't give a shit in there. Like, good luck. Hope you don't die. Have a nice day. It's like, so I did that a few times, actually. Every time I went to jail, I kicked. I never have gone to jail where I didn't have to actually withdraw from heroin. So, and you would think, okay, prison again, you know, she's got another prison number. Nope, didn't. I got out and I would go right back to it.
And for people who don't know, heroin withdrawal starts hours later, but it doesn't peak for 72. So as miserable as you feel at 48 hours, it doesn't peak until 72 hours. And then you go through the diarrhea, the throwing up. The reason it's called kicking the habit comes from opiate withdrawal, where everything twitches for like 2 days. You can't sleep. It feels like bugs crawling under your skin. It's a miserable experience.
It is miserable. It is absolutely miserable. And the horrible thing about it is you wish for death, but you never get it. It's painful, but not, I mean, you're just going to have to deal with it. It was miserable. And the insomnia and I felt like I was doing the Elaine dance from Seinfeld in that bunk, like, and you cannot control it. It is miserable. And I've done the concrete kick. That's what we call it in jail, is the concrete kick. I've been arrested 5 times and had to kick all 5 times. Ended up with 2 felonies. I maxed out. I violated twice on parole. Caught another charge, ended up getting that one dropped. I don't know. They like to give me felonies, not misdemeanors for some reason. So the little one got dropped. But after I got out, I went home to New Orleans. My husband got, for the shit that we got picked up the first time, he ended up with a 35-year sentence because they hit him with repeat. So he's actually in prison right now on his 6th year of the sentence, and he comes up for parole in August. So I'm hoping he did get a college degree out of it. So that's a good thing, but I'm hoping he will make this parole. But what led me to recovery was I found out that I had a 5-year-old nephew that we didn't know about. So all of a sudden this kid comes into my life, and he's not even, my kid, but you can't tell me that. And I fell in love with this kid, and I was so embarrassed of where I was at that I kind of like got my shit together. I got a job. I was still using, but I was changing like my behaviors, the way that I was living. And I gradually just like kind of gave myself enough of a boost of good things that it was like I just wanted to keep going. So for me, it was the opposite of rock bottom. It was some good things happening, things that I wanted to hold on to, things that I felt like not that whole don't have anything to lose anymore. My family kind of stopped with the tough love shit and we're like, well, if you're going to do it here, and that at least we can watch, like I had my own apartment in the back, but they were just like, we don't ever want to not see you again. When I was in Texas, they were so worried about me. They put out missing flyers. My mom and my aunt came down to Texas, like Cagney and Lacey, and found at the trap house and was like, just come home. So I pretty much came back from the dead as far as they're concerned. So they were like, we'd rather just have you here in whatever state that is. And that kind of unconditional love, the job, the having money and Christmas presents, and a relationship with this little angel, this little, looks just like, it's like a mini version of my brother. It's like getting to raise my little brother. I love this kid. The fact that I want to have a stable environment for my husband to come home to when he gets out, all of these good things that were happening was more of a motivation for me than not wanting it to get worse, because I had gotten so low that really the next step was death. And I was welcome at that point. It was just right. So a little bit of momentum in the positive is what brought me to recovery. And, I'd had to go to classes for prison and NA meetings and all that. That stuff never worked for me. I couldn't go sit in a room where I feel like a bunch of people are just trying to one up themselves. And I'm not saying that all meetings are like that. I'm just saying my experience, it was like that. It wasn't a positive, nurturing environment for me. So that didn't work for me. Matt didn't work for me. I abuse it every time. I cannot do it. I will end up selling my shit or doing what the doctors are giving me and street drugs.
Right.
So that's not something I can do. I'm an all or nothing kind of person. So this time, I caught a plane to my cousins in Colorado, and I said, I tried it a couple times, got a ticket back because I didn't want to lose my job. And every time I would go back, I was still sick. And if I could make a phone call and in the sickness, I'm going to do it. So I basically just had to cut myself off from everything that I knew was easy for me to use. So I came to Colorado. I kicked in my cousin's living room on the floor on a mattress and didn't get a return ticket. It was a one-way ticket. So I ended up staying. I called my job. I said, look, my life is more important than worrying about keeping a job. If I'm not alive, a job isn't going to matter. Mm-hmm. So I ended up staying here. I came to Wyoming, where I was born, where we moved away from after my dad died. And I'm working in a flower shop. I'm about to start school. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be an embalmer's, like a freelance embalmer. My dad was a mortician and a coroner. And so it's kind of like, I don't know, it's in my blood to do it. And my family still owns a funeral home, so I could do my apprenticeship there. I have my own apartment. My husband has phone time. He's got money on his books. I can buy a new pair of shoes if I want to. Everybody has Christmas presents. I'm present. It has, the more of these positive things that happen in my life, the easier it is for me to get some distance between me and what my whole identity was wrapped around, which was being a drug user.
Right.
It was part of who I am.
I tell people, as long as if you have your recovery, all the positive stuff follows it. If you stop your recovery, everything stops with it.
That's it.
You
keep that moving rolling. It's so true. It's so true. And I'm preparing, I've really just changed the whole way that I look at stuff. When I was sober before, it was like, I hated every second of it. I didn't want to be sober. It was like, in my mind, I was like, how am I going to survive sober? How am I going to do this sober? It is miserable. That thought was always in the back of my head, that I could just turn all of this misery off with that just one time. And then before I know it, I'm back in. So this time, instead of doing that, I started preparing myself for like shitty things. Like, okay, so you might experience post-acute withdrawals. You're susceptible to it. It's happened before. You might be sick for a couple of years, and that's okay. You're prepared for that. If that's what I have to do, that's what I have to do. It really happened when I gave a shit enough to kind of like switch my brain back into a different set. And the longer I get, the more I do that, the easier it gets. And I don't feel like sober is awful. I've got enough time in between me and my addiction that I really do feel like I am living and I am alive. And this time when I cry, I'm like, I'm crying. Like, I'm feeling things. This is amazing. And, you know, nobody really understands why I'm so happy to cry, but I freaking get it. You know, like, it's pretty, it's a very freeing thing. And then I found the community on TikTok, and I have always like laughed at my trauma and doing that. And that is just giving me another stepping stone of momentum, and having people message me and ask me like for advice on being sober is so far from where I thought I would be. You know, me and my talk about it all the time. I'm like, can you believe people want to like ask me how and he's like, I am shocked. I believed in you always, but I am shocked. This is bizarre. And it is bizarre, but it's been really, really great. And I feel like this time is different because I'm really doing the work on me. I'm trying to fix the shit that started all this to begin with, all the stuff that I pretended wasn't there for 15 years, you know? So it's been one hell of a ride, that's for sure. I still to this day, I think I have been to prison, and it blows my mind.
Right.
My teachers from high school would never believe it, but it can happen to anyone. Drugs don't discriminate, you know?
No, they absolutely do not. I tell that to people all the time. There are no nevers. There are only not yets. It doesn't matter who you are, what your education level is, where you came from, ethnicity, nothing.
Exactly. Nothing. We all have trauma. we all have trauma. We just, some of us have different coping mechanisms, or no coping mechanisms at all.
So Alex, tell us how long, how much clean time you've got.
It will be 11 months on the 2nd of February. Yeah. Woo! I'm blown away. It's pretty crazy.
A lot of us get clean. What is it about February? The last like 2 people I've interviewed are February. I'm February. You're February.
It's crazy.
Apparently February's the month. Pro tip, guys. You want to get clean? Do it in February. It sticks. I don't know.
It was so important to me too to be clean by my birthday. I had another birthday coming up. Like I said, I'm 37. It's not cute anymore. It stops being cute. You know, I was like, oh, I can't use in my 30s. Here I am, 37. Like, it's fucking time. Yeah. It's past. It's not cute anymore, you know?
Yeah, I was 38. I'll be 6 years in February, and I'm 44. So, yeah.
Major.
Yeah. So I was 38. So I get it. You know, I'm so almost jealous of the ones on TikTok who are even like 30, you know? Oh, I got sober at 20. What? That's awesome.
I know.
I wish I would have done it at 20. Right?
Bravo, you saved yourself some serious problems. Right? Oh my, and when people, you know, when they're 21 and I'm like, oh my God, they're like, I'm just so lost and I'm getting old. And I'm like, honey, you have your whole life ahead of you. Do not make the same mistake I made and end up almost 40 with really, you know, and I'm starting over. I'm starting from the ground up. I have nothing and 2 felonies that follow me around, you know? It's not easy, but when you're ready, you're ready. And when you're ready to do the work, you're ready. I really feel like, and that's, you know, people ask me all the time, how do I get my, so, and I'm like, if they're not there, you can always leave the option for help open. You can, that's my biggest advice. Always let them know that when they're ready for help, you're there. But you can't do it for them.
No, because they have to do all the work.
All the work, yeah. Because if our families could fix us, there would be no addiction. If people loved us and could love us out of our drug addiction, there would be no problem. But it's just not possible. You have to do the work yourself.
Right. Right. Well, Alex, thank you so much for, again, coming on here and just being vulnerable and sharing your story. And we plan on following up, the 1 year mark of our first episode. We plan on following up with everybody. So we'll definitely be talking to you soon, and I'll see you on TikTok.
Obviously.
Tell everybody what name they can find you under.
Alexis on fire. Oh no.
There you go. Perfect.
All right. Thank you so much, Leslie. I appreciate the opportunity.
No problem. And that's going to do it for this episode of The Recovery Scene. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us and listening to Alex's story. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.